YouTube, what's going on, people? We are back wrapping it up with an incredible Week 16 on Monday Night Football. What a week we just had on Saturday and Sunday in the NFL for Week 16. That Chicago Bears game with the Green Bay Packers on Saturday night was probably one of, and I say probably because it just comes to mind, the Thursday night game that we had in LA. You could make a case for each one of those games being the game of the year up until this point. Sunday afternoon yesterday, we had a couple of good games, in particular the very big upset with the Jacksonville Jaguars on the road, absolutely hammering the Denver Broncos. Maybe not a great game as far as entertainment, but a huge game as it pertains to the AFC standings. Last night, another monumental game. Unfortunate to see Lamar Jackson go down in a massive game for the Baltimore Ravens, but this New England Patriots team continues to silence its doubters. Moving into tonight, guys, as I mentioned, we're concluding Week 16 in the NFL. We have the San Francisco 49ers on the road as 5.5-point favorites against the Indianapolis Colts. Guys, this game, from a bettor's perspective, is quite simple to understand. First and foremost, before we get into that, it's a massive game for each team. We have the San Francisco 49ers right now sitting in third place in the NFC West. And after what happened on Thursday night, they now control their own destiny. If the San Francisco 49ers win out, including tonight, obviously, they will be the winners in the NFC West. With that said, the Colts are in a very similar position on their side of the conference in the AFC. The Colts are in third place in the AFC South. There are multiple games behind the Jacksonville Jaguars who are in first place, and they're also behind the Houston Texans, who currently sit as the seventh seed in the AFC. So in order for these two teams to make up ground in their division and in the conference standings, obviously tonight's game is going to have a huge impact for both of these teams. Looking at this game, guys, we get an opportunity to see this Indianapolis Colts team face off, as I just talked about, 2 weeks in a row against NFC West opponents. They obviously went on the road last week at Seattle, and in my opinion, they were the better team in Seattle last week. They should have won that game. That game last week comes down to two things as to why the Indianapolis Colts outplayed the Seattle Seahawks, but unfortunately for the Indianapolis Colts, came out of that game with an L. First and foremost, they weren't able to finish off drives. They got into scoring position on many different occasions, and every single one of those drives ended up finishing and resulting in field goal attempts. That's not going to cut it tonight against the San Francisco 49ers. Second of all, they had the game won even with field goals. That game was lost by Shane Steichen. You have an opportunity to, number one, improve the field position and make the game-winning kick at that time even shorter. But more importantly, the mistake was not settling for a 60-yard field goal to take the lead, but removing the remaining time in the game to not give the ball back to the Seattle Seahawks. And ultimately, that was the undoing by Shane Steichen. He settled for a 60-yard field goal. They end up making the field goal, but they give the ball back with enough time to the Seattle Seahawks, as opposed to being a little bit more aggressive, gaining a first down, and being able to eliminate the remainder of the clock, and they end up losing that game. With that said, guys, that game in Seattle last week is far more difficult than the game they're facing today. And as I just mentioned, they should have won that game outright. Seattle is a better team offensively than the San Francisco 49ers. The Indianapolis Colts last week did a tremendous job defensively against that Seattle team. The Seattle Seahawks are a better team defensively, significantly better team defensively than the San Francisco 49ers. Phillip Rivers, like the whole world was able to view last week, obviously at 44-45, isn't the same player that we saw 10 years ago. I know he retired 5 years ago. He might be a similar player to what he was 5 years ago, but he definitely isn't the same player he was 10 years ago. Ability to move the ball downfield wasn't there last week. He's getting rid of the ball quick. He's not taking a ton of hits, but at the same time, he's not generating big plays. I think, based on what we saw last week, we're going to see a similar Phillip Rivers this week. The arm strength just isn't there physically for him to push the ball downfield. But at the same time, he's going to slowly start to improve on his ability to understand and play at this speed of game. When you take 5 years off, the biggest issue players are going to have is adjusting to the speed of the game. With 1 week under his belt, I think you're going to see a little bit of an improvement from Phillip Rivers. And as I just mentioned to you, this Indianapolis Colts team was better than Seattle last week. They outplayed a better Seattle team on the road last week. Now they're at home. You get week number 2 with Phillip Rivers. I don't think it's realistic to suggest all of a sudden he's going to have an outstanding game. He was poor last week, relatively poor. Subpar is the best way to describe it because he wasn't terrible. He didn't make any mistakes. He's not going to make a ton of mistakes tonight. He might make some mistakes, but he's not going to make a ton of mistakes. That's what you get with the veteran quarterback. He's going to get rid of the ball quick. He's going to keep the offense on schedule. But the best thing that we're going to see is an improvement from him adjusting to the speed of the game. With that said, all we need to see from this Indianapolis Colts team is defensively to put in another strong performance. I don't anticipate it being an elite performance like we saw last week, even though it's a lesser San Francisco 49ers offense. This game is too big for both teams. Just like last week's game, this game is going to come down to the wire. I do think the 49ers end up pulling this game out and winning a tight game. But at the end of the day, 5.5 points for Phillip Rivers and this Indianapolis Colts team is just too many points. Give me the Indianapolis Colts tonight plus 5.5 points to cover the number. Guys, like the video, subscribe to the channel. As always, I will be back.